Hey everyone, Andrew DeBisser here from Fletcher Forge & Tool, and today we're talking about knife sharpening. Now I've got a few diagrams here, and all of these are just looking at a cross section of the blade. So if you were to chop half of this blade off and look at it from the end, that is the viewpoint that we're looking at here. So there's a couple of different ways to sharpen a knife. Now if you're sharpening your knife with a straight cutting implement like a file or a diamond hone, you're going to end up with a straight grind along the cutting edge, which is perfectly fine. That can be steeper or more shallow depending on the type of feet you're working on. So if you're working in an area, and this goes for all of these methods of sharpening, if you're working in an area with really hard dry feet, you're going to want a steeper angle. That angle is not going to cut as efficiently, but it is going to stand up to a little bit more abuse. If you work in an area with a lot of wet feet, you're going to want to have a shallower angle. That's going to slip through the material much more easily. The edge is going to break down a little bit faster, but again, if you're working on wetter feet, that is not going to be as much of a concern. So a straight edge is kind of the happy medium. It's pretty easy to put in, it's pretty easy to maintain. A convex edge is a very strong edge because the cutting tip is well supported by material, but it's not very efficient at cutting. A concave or a hollow grind is the opposite. The edge is unsupported, but it's very thin at the leading edge where the cutting edge is. So this grind is going to slide through the material very easily. So this is usually put, if you want to maintain a hollow grind, you're going to be using a round wheel. So like something like a buffing wheel is just inherently going to put a bit of a hollow grind in there. Now, whether you're using a straight or a hollow grind, angle has a lot to do with it. So you can see here, we have a little bit of a hollow grind here, but it's very steep, and a hollow grind here, but it's very shallow. So whether it's a straight grind or a hollow grind, angle makes a big difference. So again, if you're in an area, where there's very hard feet, steeper angle, and wet feet, shallower angle. On average though, 22.5 degrees is a really good starting point. And the way you remember that is that you take 90 degrees, half of that is 45, and half of that again is 22.5. So that's an easy way to remember it. Now what happens if we have our standard blade here, and we often will tend to go a little bit steeper to try to get the edge back, because if we cut in steeper, it's a lot easier to get this face to meet this face. So if we go steeper, we're cutting through a lot less material right here. And then the next time we sharpen our knife, we cut a little bit steeper, and the next time a little bit steeper. And before you know it, we end up with an edge that is technically sharp, but it's very inefficient at cutting. So what we have to do at that point is to take some time and regrind all of this back to an appropriate angle. And it's best if we can maintain that angle, but it's just human nature. We just often will tip our knife or our sharpener up just that little bit, just to cheat a little bit and get a little bit less time, or take a little less time to sharpen this up. But really, if you can have a two-stage sharpening system, if you can have a coarser and then a finer finisher, that's a great way of doing it. So the Fletcher Forge & Tool sharpening kit, which we have here, it works off of that system. So this wheel is actually an 80 grit, and this removes material quite quickly without the need for a lot of pressure. And then we have the buffing wheel, which is great for fine-tuning that last little bit and just getting in there and really honing everything up. So by using both of these, you can use just the buffer, but you have to be very consistent with your sharpening. You really can't let the knife get dull. You really just have to keep that edge honed. And if you don't do that, or if you have a horse with that just really dulls your knife really quickly, you're just going to end up pushing too hard on this and dulling the edge. So having a two-stage system, whether that's with the sharpening kit that I sell or with diamond hones or whatever you're using, a two-stage system really is good. It can be actually significantly faster in the long run if you get used to it. So one other thing I wanted to point out is the width of the blade of a knife. Now I like a wide blade on my knives because Well, to be frank, I don't like buying new knives all the time. The downside to a wide knife is that it really doesn't want to turn corners. So if you think about an arc, because when we're carving in the bottom of a horse's foot, there's arcs all over the place, right? The sole is, generally speaking, hopefully concave. But if you have an arc and you're trying to cut around this arc with a straight implement, it's going to get bound up. It's only going to want to go in a straight line. It's not going to want to turn that corner. If you have something that's very narrow, it's going to have a much easier time. So you guys probably notice, just from experience, as your knife blade gets more and more worn out, it gets much more agile and goes around the foot very easily. But again, a lot of manufacturers make knives narrower because they feel great just out of the box. So what I've done is I have actually beveled the back side of my hoof knives. Now this bevel still gives you that plane to reference off of as you're cutting. So you have a really good idea of where the depth of cut is, but at the same time, there's still relief on the back. So these knives will go around a foot like a blade that's half the width, but you still get that nice wide blade which is going to last a really long time. So let's look at the sharpening kit. And again, Fletcher Forge & Tool sells these kits. So you get the coarse and the fine buffing wheel, and the double stack for sharpening the rasps, and all of the corresponding compounds. So to start with, I usually like to have these mounted on a half-speed grinder, 1750 RPM. Anything faster than that and you run the risk of burning the blade. So this is on a variable speed, which is really nice because you don't really have to worry about burning the blade so much on the fine buffing wheel. But with this one, you can just turn it up. So safety glasses on, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this buffing, I'm going to line my knife up with the buffing wheel, and again I'm going to start at 90, then we'll come to 45, half of that again is 22.5, and that is the angle I'm going to sharpen this at. As I'm sharpening, I'm taking a firm grasp with both hands, so I'm able to consistently keep my angle, but there's also very little risk of just grabbing and flinging the knife out of my hands. So 3 passes is usually all it takes on the coarse side. Take the burr off once. We apply compound. Same thing as when we were using the coarse wheel. Not pushing hard, especially here. Allowing the buffing compound to do the work. One more very light pass. So this knife was very well used. And we can see we're shaving sharp after only a total of 6 passes. So very, very quick, very effective way to get an edge on a hoof knife. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching. If you like, you can check out both the knives and the buffing compound, FletcherForgeandTool.com. And I'm on Facebook and all of that good stuff as well. So thanks again. Take care.